Chapter 13. The Restoration. The Tin Owl gave a hoot of delight when he saw the red wagon draw up before Ginger's house, and the brown bear grunted and growled with glee and trotted toward Ozma as fast as he could wobble. As for the canary, it flew swiftly to Dorothy's shoulder and perched there, saying in her ear, "Thank goodness you have come to our rescue." "But who are you?" asked Dorothy. "Don't you know?" returned the canary. "No, for the first time we noticed you in the magic picture, you were just a bird, as you are now. But we've guessed that the giant woman had transformed you, as she did the others." "Yes, I'm Polychrome, the rainbow's daughter," announced the canary. "Goodness me, how dreadful." "Well, I make a rather pretty bird, I think," returned Polychrome, "but of course I'm anxious to resume my own shape and get back upon my rainbow." "Ozma will help you, I'm sure," said Dorothy. "How does it feel, Scarecrow, to be a bear?" she asked, addressing her old friend. "I don't like it," declared the Scarecrow Bear. "This brutal form is quite beneath the dignity of a wholesome straw man." "And think of me," said the owl, perching upon the dashboard of the red wagon, with much noisy clattering of his tin feathers. "Don't I look horrid, Dorothy, with eyes several sizes too big for my body, and so weak that I ought to wear spectacles?" "Well," said Dorothy critically, as she looked over him, "you're nothing to brag of, I must confess, but Ozma will soon fix you up again." The green monkey had hung back, bashful at meeting two lovely girls, while in the form of a beast, but Ginger now took his hand and led him forward while she introduced him to Ozma, and Woot managed to make a low bow, not really ungraceful before her girlish majesty, the ruler of Oz. "You have all been forced to endure a sad experience," said Ozma, "and so I am anxious to do all in my power to break Mrs. Yoop's enchantments. But first, tell me how you happened to stray into that lonely valley where Yoop Castle stands." Between them they related the object of their journey, the Scarecrow Bear telling of the Tin Woodman's resolve to find Nimmie Amee and marry her as a just reward for her loyalty to him. Woot told of their adventures with the loons of Loonville, and the Tin Owl described the manner in which they had been captured and transformed by the giantess. Then Polychrome related her story, and when all had been told, and Dorothy had several times reproved Toto for growling at the Tin Owl, Ozma remained thoughtful for a while, pondering upon what she had heard. Finally she looked up, and with one of her delightful smiles, said to the anxious group, "I'm not sure my magic will be able to restore every one of you, because your transformations are of such strange and unusual character." Indeed, Mrs. Yoop was quite justified in believing no power could alter her enchantments. "However, I'm sure I can restore the Scarecrow to his original shape. He was stuffed with straw from the beginning, and even the Yukahu magic could not alter that. The giantess was merely able to make a bear's shape of a man's shape, but the bear is stuffed with straw just as the man was. So I feel confident I can make a man of the bear again." "Hurrah!" cried the brown bear, and tried clumsily to dance a jig of delight. "As for the Tin Woodman, his case is much the same," resumed Ozma, still smiling. "The power of the giantess could not make him anything but a tin creature, whatever shape she transformed him into. So it will not be impossible to restore him to his manly form. Anyhow, I shall test my magic at once and see if it will do what I have promised." She drew from her bosom a small silver wand, and, making passes with the wand over the head of the bear, she succeeded in the brief space of a moment in breaking his enchantment. The original Scarecrow of Oz again stood before them, well stuffed with straw, and with his features nicely painted upon the bag which formed his head. The Scarecrow was greatly delighted, as you may suppose, and he strutted proudly around while the powerful fairy Ozma of Oz broke the enchantment that had transformed the Tin Woodman and made a Tin Owl into a Tin Man again. Now then, chirped the canary eagerly, I'm next, Ozma, but in your case is different, replied Ozma, no longer smiling, but wearing a grave expression on her sweet face. I shall have to experiment on you, Polychrome, and I may fail in all my attempts. She then tried 2 or 3 different methods of magic, hoping one of them would succeed in breaking Polychrome's enchantment. But still the Rainbow's daughter remained a canary bird. Finally, however, she experimented in another way. She transformed the canary into a dove, and then transformed the dove into a speckled hen, and then changed the speckled hen into a rabbit, and then the rabbit into a fawn. And at last, after mixing several powders and sprinkling them upon the fawn, the Yukuhu enchantment was suddenly broken, and before them stood one of the daintiest and loveliest creatures in any fairyland in the world. Polychrome was as sweet and merry in disposition as she was beautiful, and when she danced and capered around in delight, her beautiful hair floated around her like a golden mist, and her many-hued raiment, as soft as cobwebs, reminded one of drifting clouds in a summer sky. Woot was so awed by the entrancing sight of this exquisite sky fairy that he quite forgot his own sad plight until he noticed Ozma gazing upon him with an intent expression that denoted sympathy and sorrow. Dorothy whispered in her friend's ear, but the ruler of Oz shook her head sadly. Ginger, noticing this and understanding Ozma's looks, took the paw of the green monkey in her own hand and patted it softly. "Never mind," she said to him. "You are a very beautiful color, and a monkey can climb better than a boy and do a lot of other things no boy can ever do." "What's the matter?" asked Woot, a sinking feeling at his heart. "Is Ozma's magic all used up?" Ozma herself answered him. "Your form of enchantment, my poor boy," she said pityingly, "is different from that of the others. Indeed, it is a form that is impossible to alter by any magic known to fairies or Yukuhus. The wicked giantess was well aware, when she gave you the form of a green monkey, that the green monkey must exist in the land of Oz for all future time." Woot drew a long sigh. "Well, that's pretty hard luck," he said bravely. "But if it can't be helped, I must endure it, that's all. I don't like being a monkey, but what's the use of kicking against my fate?" They were all very sorry for him, and Dorothy anxiously asked Ozma, "Couldn't Glinda save him?" "No," was the reply. "Glinda's power in transformations is no greater than my own. Before I left my palace, I went to my magic room and studied Woot's case very carefully. I found that no power can do away with the green monkey. He might transfer or exchange his form with some other person, it is true, but the green monkey we cannot get rid of by any magic arts known to science." "But see here," said the Scarecrow, who had listened intently to this explanation, "why not put the monkey's form on someone else?" "Who would you agree to make the change?" asked Ozma. "If by force we caused anyone else to become a green monkey, we would be as cruel and wicked as Mrs. Yoop." "And what good would an exchange do?" she continued. "Suppose, for instance, we worked the enchantment and made Toto into a green monkey. At the same moment, Woot would become a little dog." "Leave me out of your magic, please," said Toto, with a reproachful growl. "I wouldn't become a green monkey for anything." "And I wouldn't become a dog," said Woot. "A green monkey is much better than a dog, it seems to me." "That is only a matter of opinion," answered Toto. "Now here's another idea," said the Scarecrow. "My brains are working finely today, you must admit. Why not transform Toto into Woot the Wanderer, and then have them exchange forms? The dog would become a green monkey, and the monkey would have his own natural shape again." "To be sure," cried Ginger. "That's a fine idea." "Leave me out of it," said Toto. I won't do it. Wouldn't you be willing to become a green monkey? See what a pretty colour it is, so that this poor boy could be rescued to his own shape? Asked Ginger, pleadingly. No, said Toto. I don't like that plan the least bit, declared Dorothy, for then I wouldn't have any little dog. But you'd have a green monkey, said Dorothy positively. Don't speak of this again, I beg you, said Woot. This is my own misfortune, and I would rather suffer it alone than deprive Princess Dorothy of her dog, or deprive the dog of his proper shape. And perhaps even Her Majesty, Ozma of Oz, might not be able to transform anyone else into the shape of Woot the Wanderer. Yes, I believe I might do that, Ozma returned, but Woot is quite right. We are not justified in inflicting upon anyone, man or dog, the form of a green monkey. Also, it is certain that in order to relieve the boy of the form he now wears, we must give it to someone else, who would be forced to wear it always. I wonder, said Dorothy thoughtfully, if we couldn't find someone in the land of Oz who would be willing to become a green monkey. Seems to me a monkey is active and spry, and he can climb trees and do a lot of clever things, and green isn't a bad colour for a monkey. It makes him unusual. I wouldn't ask anyone to take this dreadful form, said Woot. It wouldn't be right, you know. I've been a monkey for some time now, and I don't like it. It makes me ashamed to be a beast of this sort when, by right of birth, I'm a boy, so I'm sure it would be wicked to ask anyone else to take my place. They were all silent, for they knew he spoke the truth. Dorothy was almost ready to cry with pity, and Ozma's sweet face was sad and disturbed. The Scarecrow rubbed and patted his stuffed head to try to make it think better, while the Tin Woodman went into the house and began to oil his tin joints so that the sorrow of his friends might not cause him to weep. Weeping is liable to rust tin, and the Emperor prided himself upon his highly polished body, now doubly dear to him because for a time he had been deprived of it. Polychrome had danced down the garden paths and back again 12 times, for she was seldom still a moment. Yet she had heard Ozma's speech and understood very well Woot's unfortunate position. But the Rainbow's Daughter, even while dancing, could think and reason very clearly, and suddenly she solved the problem in the nicest possible way. Coming close to Ozma, she said, "Your Majesty, all this trouble was caused by the wickedness of Mrs. Yoop, the giantess. Yet even now, that cruel woman is living in her secluded castle, enjoying the thought that she has put this terrible enchantment on Woot the Wanderer. Even now she is laughing at our despair because we can find no way to get rid of the green monkey. Very well, we do not wish to get rid of it. Let the woman who created the form wear it herself, as a just punishment for her wickedness. I'm sure your fairy power can give to Mrs. Yoop the form of Woot the Wanderer, even at this distance from her, and then it will be possible to exchange the two forms. Mrs. Yoop will become the green monkey, and Woot will recover his own form again." Ozma's face brightened as she listened to this clever proposal. "Thank you, Polychrome," said she. "The task you propose is not so easy as you suppose, but I will make the attempt, and perhaps I may succeed." Chapter 14. The Green Monkey. They now entered the house, and as an interested group, watched Ginger, at Ozma's command, build a fire and put a kettle of water over to boil. The ruler of Oz stood before the fire silent and grave, while the others, realizing that an important ceremony of magic was about to be performed, stood quietly in the background, so as not to interrupt Ozma's proceedings. Only Polychrome kept going in and coming out, humming softly to herself as she danced, for the Rainbow's Daughter could not keep still for long, and the four walls of a room always made her nervous and ill at ease. She moved so noiselessly, however, that her movements were like the shifting of sunbeams, and did not annoy anyone. When the water in the kettle bubbled, Ozma drew from her bosom 2 tiny packets containing powders. These powders she threw into the kettle, and after briskly stirring the contents with a branch from a macaroon bush, Ozma poured the mystic broth upon a broad platter which Ginger had placed upon the table. As the broth cooled, it became a silver, reflecting all objects from its smooth surface like a mirror. While her companions gathered around the table, eagerly attentive, and Dorothy even held little Toto in her arms that he might see, Ozma waved her wand over the mirror-like surface. At once it reflected the interior of Yoop Castle, and in the big hall sat Mrs. Yoop, in her best embroidered silken robes, engaging in weaving a new lace apron to replace the one she had lost. The giantess seemed rather uneasy, as if she had a faint idea that someone was spying upon her, for she kept looking behind her and this way and that, as though expecting danger from an unknown source. Perhaps some Yookoohoo instinct warned her. Woot saw that she had escaped from her room by some of the magical means at her disposal after her prisoners had escaped her. She was now occupying the big hall of her castle as she used to do. Also, Woot thought from the cruel expression on the face of the giantess that she was planning revenge on them as soon as her new magic apron was finished. But Ozma was now making passes over the platter with her silver wand, and presently the form of the giantess began to shrink in size and to change its shape. And now, in her place sat the form of Woot the Wanderer, and as if suddenly realizing her transformation, Mrs. Yoop threw down her work and rushed to a looking-glass that stood against the wall of her room. When she saw the boy's form reflected as her own, she grew violently angry and dashed her head against the mirror, smashing it to atoms. Just then, Ozma was busy with her magic wand, making strange figures, and she had also placed her left hand firmly upon the shoulder of the green monkey. So now, as all eyes were turned upon the platter, the form of Mrs. Yoop gradually changed again. She was slowly transformed into the green monkey, and at the same time Woot slowly regained his natural form. It was quite a surprise to them all when they raised their eyes from the platter and saw Woot the Wanderer standing beside Ozma, and when they glanced at the platter again, it reflected nothing more than the walls of the room in Ginger's house in which they stood. The magic ceremonial was ended, and Ozma and Oz had triumphed over the wicked giantess. "What will become of her, I wonder?" said Dorothy, as she drew a long breath. "She will always remain a green monkey," replied Ozma, "and in that form she will be unable to perform any magical arts whatsoever. She need not be unhappy, however, and as she lives all alone in her castle, she probably won't mind the transformation very much after she gets used to it." "Anyhow, it serves her right," declared Dorothy, and all agreed with her. "But," said the kind-hearted Tin Woodman, "I'm afraid the green monkey will starve, for Mrs. Yoop used to get her food by magic, and now that the magic is taken away from her, what can she eat?" "Why, she'll eat what other monkeys do," returned the Scarecrow. "Even in the form of a green monkey, she's a very clever person, and I'm sure her wits will show her how to get plenty to eat." "Don't worry about her," advised Dorothy. "She didn't worry about you, and her condition is no worse than the condition she imposed on poor Woot. She can't starve to death in the land of Oz, that's certain, and if she gets hungry at times, it's no more than the wicked thing deserves. Let's forget Mrs. Yoop, for in spite of her being a Yookoohoo, our fairy friends have broken all her transformations." Chapter 15. The Man of Tin. Ozma and Dorothy were quite pleased with Woot the Wanderer, whom they found modest and intelligent and very well-mannered. The boy was truly grateful for his release from the cruel enchantment, and he promised to love, revere, and defend the girl ruler of Oz forever afterward, as a faithful subject. "You may visit me at my palace if you wish," said Ozma, where I will be glad to introduce you to 2 other nice boys, Ojo the Munchkin and Button Bright." "Thank you, Your Majesty," replied Woot, and then he hurried to the Tin Woodman and inquired, "What are your further plans, Mr. Emperor? Will you seek Nimmie Amee and marry her, or will you abandon the quest and return to the Emerald City and your own castle?" The Tin Woodman was now as highly polished and well-oiled as ever, and reflected a while on this question, and then answered, "Well, I see no reason why I should not find Nimmie Amee. We are now in the Munchkin Country, where we are perfectly safe, and if it was right for me, before our enchantment, to marry Nimmie Amee and make her Empress of the Winkies, it must be right now, when the enchantment has been broken, and I am once more myself." "Am I correct, friend Scarecrow?" "You are indeed," answered the Scarecrow. "No one can oppose such logic." "But I'm afraid you don't love Nimmie Amee," suggested Dorothy. "That is just because I can't love anyone," replied the Tin Woodman. "But if I cannot love my wife, I can at least be kind to her, and all husbands are not able to do that." "Do you suppose Nimmie Amee still loves you after all these years?" asked Dorothy. "I'm quite sure of it, and that is why I'm going to her to make her happy. Woot the Wanderer thinks I ought to reward her for being faithful to me after my meat's body was chopped to pieces, and I became tin. What do you think, Ozma?" Ozma smiled as she said, "I do not know your Nimmie Amee, and so I cannot tell you what she most needs to make her happy. But there is no harm in your going to her and asking her if she still wishes to marry you. If she does, we will give you a grand wedding at the Emerald City, and afterward, as Empress of the Winkies, Nimmie Amee would become one of the most important ladies in all Oz." So it was decided that the Tin Woodman would continue his journey, and that the Scarecrow and Woot the Wanderer should accompany him as before. Polychrome also decided to join their party, somewhat to the surprise of all. "I hate to be cooped up in the palace," she said to Ozma, "and of course the first time I meet my rainbow, I shall return to my own dear home in the skies, where my fairy sisters are even now awaiting me, and my father is cross because I get lost so often. But I can find my rainbow just as quickly while traveling in the Munchkin Country as I could if living in the Emerald City, or any other place in Oz, so I shall go with the Tin Woodman and help him woo Nimmie Amee." Dorothy wanted to go too, but as the Tin Woodman did not invite her to join his party, she felt she might be intruding if she asked to be taken. She hinted, but she found he didn't take the hint. It is quite a delicate matter for one to ask a girl to marry him, however much she loves him, and perhaps the Tin Woodman did not desire to have too many looking on when he found his old sweetheart Nimmie Amee. So Dorothy contented herself with the thought that she would help Ozma prepare a splendid wedding feast, to be followed by a round of parties and festivities when the Emperor of the Winkies reached the Emerald City with his bride. Ozma offered to take them all in the Red Wagon to a place as near to the Great Munchkin Forest as a wagon could get. The Red Wagon was big enough to seat them all, and so, bidding goodbye to Ginger, who gave Woot a basket of ripe cream puffs and caramels to take with him, Ozma commanded the wooden sawhorse to start, and the strange creature moved swiftly over the lanes and presently came to the road of yellow bricks. This road led straight to a dense forest, where the path was too narrow for the Red Wagon to proceed farther, so here the party separated. Ozma and Dorothy and Toto returned to the Emerald City after wishing their friends a safe and successful journey, while the Tin Woodman, the Scarecrow, Woot the Wanderer, and Polychrome, the Rainbow's daughter, prepared to push their way through the thick forest. However, these forest paths were well known to the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, who felt quite at home among the trees. "I was born in this grand forest," said Nick Chopper, the Tin Emperor, speaking proudly, "and it was here that the witch enchanted my axe and I lost different parts of my meat's body until I became all tin. Here also, for it is a big forest, Nimmie Amee lived with the Wicked Witch, and at the other edge of the trees stands the cottage of my friend Kuklip, the famous tinsmith who made my present beautiful form. He must be a clever workman, declared Woot admiringly. He's simply wonderful, declared the Tin Woodman. I shall be glad to make his acquaintance, said Woot. If you wish to meet with real cleverness, remarked the Scarecrow, you should visit the Munchkin farmer who first made me. I won't say that my friend the Emperor isn't all right for a Tin Man, but any judge of beauty can understand that a Scarecrow is far more artistic and refined. You are too soft and flimsy, said the Tin Woodman. You are too hard and stiff, said the Scarecrow, and this was as near to quarrelling as the two friends ever came. Polychrome laughed at them both, as well she might, and Woot hastened to change the subject. At night they all camped underneath the trees. The boy ate cream puffs for supper, and offered Polychrome some, but she preferred other food, and at daybreak sipped the dew that was clustered thick on the forest flowers. Then they trampled onward again, and presently the Scarecrow paused and said, "It was on this very spot that Dorothy and I first met the Tin Woodman, who was rusted so badly that none of his joints would move. But after we had oiled him up, he was as good as new, and accompanied us to the Emerald City." "Ah, that was a sad experience," asserted the Tin Woodman soberly. "I was caught in a rainstorm while chopping down a tree for exercise. And before I realized it, I was firmly rusted in every joint. There I stood, axe in hand, but unable to move, for days and weeks and months. Indeed, I have never known exactly how long the time was, but finally along came Dorothy, and I was saved. See, this is the very tree I was chopping at the time I rusted." "You cannot be far from your old home in that case," said Woot. "No, my little cabin stands not a great way off. But there is no occasion for us to visit it. Our errand is with Nimmie Amee, and her house is somewhat farther away, to the left of us." "Didn't you say she lives with a wicked witch, who makes her a slave?" asked the boy. "She did, but she doesn't," was the reply. "I am told the witch was destroyed when Dorothy's house fell on her, so now Nimmie Amee must live all alone. I haven't seen her, of course, since the witch was crushed, for at that time I was standing rusted in the forest and had been there a long time, but the poor girl must have felt very happy to be free from her cruel mistress." "Well," said the Scarecrow, "let's travel on and find Nimmie Amee. Lead on, your Majesty, since you know the way, and we will follow." So the Tin Woodman took a path that led through the thickest part of the forest, and they followed it for some time. The light was dim here because vines and bushes and leafy foliage were all about them, and often the Tin Man had to push aside the branches that obstructed their way, or cut them off with his axe. After they had proceeded some distance, the Emperor suddenly stopped short and exclaimed, "Good gracious!" The Scarecrow, who was next, first bumped into his friend and then peered around his tin body and said, in a tone of wonder, "Well, I declare!" Woot the Wanderer pushed forward to see what was the matter and cried out in astonishment, "For goodness sake!" Then the three stood motionless, staring hard, until Polychrome's merry laughter rang out behind them and aroused them from their stupor. In the path before them stood a Tin Man, who was the exact duplicate of the Tin Woodman. He was of the same size, he was jointed in the same manner, and he was made of shining tin from top to toe. But he stood immovable, with his tin jaws half parted and his tin eyes turned upwards. In one of his hands was held a long gleaming sword. Yes, there was a difference, the only thing that distinguished him from the Emperor of the Winkies. This Tin Man bore a sword, while the Tin Woodman bore an axe. "It's a dream, it must be a dream," gasped Woot. "That's it, of course," said the Scarecrow. There couldn't be two Tin Woodmen. No, agreed Polychrome, dancing nearer to the stranger. This one is a tin soldier. Don't you see his sword? The Tin Woodman cautiously put out one tin hand and felt of his double's arm. Then he said in a voice that trembled with emotion, "Who are you, friend?" There was no reply. "Can't you see he's rusted, just as you were once?" asked Polychrome, laughing again. "Here, Nick Chopper, lend me your oil can a minute." The Tin Woodman silently handed her his oil can, without which he never travelled, and Polychrome first oiled the stranger's tin jaws, and then worked them gently to and fro until the tin soldier said, "That's enough, thank you. I can now talk, but please oil my other joints." Woot seized the oil can and did this, but all the others helped wiggle the soldier's joints as soon as they were oiled, until they moved freely. The tin soldier seemed highly pleased at his release. He strutted up and down the path, saying in a high, thin voice, "The soldier is a splendid man when marching on parade, and when he meets his enemy, he never is afraid. He rights the wrongs of nations, his country's flag defends. The foe he'll fight with great delight, but seldom fights his friends." Chapter 16. Captain Fighter. "Are you really a soldier?" asked Woot, when they had all watched this strange tin person parade up and down the path and proudly flourish his sword. "I was a soldier," was the reply, "but I've been a prisoner to Mr. Rust so long that I don't know exactly what I am." "But dear me," cried the Tin Woodman, sadly perplexed, "how came you to be made of tin?" "That," answered the soldier, "is a sad, sad story. I was in love with a beautiful Munchkin girl who lived with a wicked witch. The witch did not wish me to marry the girl, so she enchanted my sword, which began hacking me to pieces. When I lost my legs, I went to the tinsmith, Kuklip, and he made me some tin legs. When I lost my arms, Kuklip made me tin arms, and when I lost my head, he made me this fine one out of tin. It was the same way with my body, and finally I was all tin. But I was not unhappy, for Kuklip made a good job of me, having had experience in making another tin man before me." "Yes," observed the Tin Woodman, "it was Kuklip who made me. But tell me, what was the name of the Munchkin girl you were in love with?" "She is called Nimmie Amee," said the tin soldier. Hearing this, they were all so astonished that they were silent for a time, regarding the stranger with wondering looks. Finally, the Tin Woodman ventured to ask, "And did Nimmie Amee return your love?" "Not at first," admitted the soldier. "When first I marched into the forest and met her, she was weeping over the loss of her former sweetheart, a woodman whose name was Nick Chopper." "That is me," said the Tin Woodman. "She told me he was nicer than a soldier because he was all made of tin and shone beautifully in the sun. She said the Tin Man appealed to her artistic instincts more than an ordinary meat man, as I was then. But I did not despair because her tin sweetheart had disappeared and could not be found. And finally, Nimmie Amee permitted me to call upon her, and we became friends. It was then that the wicked witch discovered me and became furiously angry when I said I wanted to marry the girl. She enchanted my sword, as I said, and then my troubles began. When I got my tin legs, Nimmie Amee began to take an interest in me. When I got my tin arms, she began to like me better than ever, and when I was all made of tin, she said I looked like her dear Nick Chopper, and she would be willing to marry me. The day of our wedding was set, and it turned out to be a rainy day. Nevertheless, I started out to get Nimmie Amee because the witch had been absent for some time, and we meant to elope before she got back. As I travelled the forest paths, the rain wetted my joints, but I paid no attention to this because my thoughts were all on my wedding with beautiful Nimmie Amee, and I could think of nothing else until suddenly my legs stopped moving. Then my arms rusted at the joints, and I became frightened and cried for help, for now I was unable to oil myself. No one heard my calls, and before long my jaws rusted, and I was unable to utter another sound. So I stood helpless in this spot, hoping some wanderer would come my way and save me. But this forest path is seldom used, and I have been standing here so long that I have lost all track of time. In my mind I composed poetry and sang songs, but not a sound have I been able to utter. But this desperate condition has now been relieved by your coming my way, and I must thank you for my rescue." "This is wonderful," said the Scarecrow, heaving a stuffy, long sigh. "I think Kusi was wrong to make two tin men just alike, and the strangest thing of all is that both you tin men fell in love with the same girl." "As for that," returned the soldier seriously, "I must admit I lost my ability to love when I lost my meat heart. Kusi made me a tin heart, to be sure, but it doesn't love anything, as far as I can discover, and merely rattles against my tin ribs, which makes me wish I had no heart at all." "Yet, in spite of this condition, you were going to marry Nimmie Amee?" "Well, you see, I had promised to marry her, and I am an honest man, and always try to keep my promises. I didn't like to disappoint the poor girl, who had been disappointed by one tin man already. That was not my fault," declared the Emperor of the Winkies, and then he related how he also had rusted in the forest and, after a long time, had been rescued by Dorothy and the Scarecrow, and had travelled with them to the Emerald City in search of a heart that could love. "If you have found such a heart, sir," said the soldier, "I will gladly allow you to marry Nimmie Amee in my place." "If she loves you best, sir," answered the woodman, "I shall not interfere with your wedding her. For, to be quite frank with you, I cannot yet love Nimmie Amee as I did before I became tin." "Still, one of you ought to marry the poor girl," remarked Woot, "and if she likes tin men, there is not much choice between you. Why don't you draw lots for her?" "That wouldn't be right," said the Scarecrow. "The girl should be permitted to choose her own husband," asserted Polychrome. "You should both go to her and allow her to take her choice. Then she will surely be happy." "That, to me, seems a very fair arrangement," said the Tin Soldier. "I agree to it," said the Tin Woodman, shaking the hand of his twin to show the matter was settled. "May I ask your name, sir?" he continued. "Before I was so cut up," replied the other, "I was known as Captain Fighter, but afterward I was merely called the Tin Soldier." "Well, Captain, if you are agreeable, let us now go to Nimmie Amee's house and let her choose between us." "Very well, and if we meet the witch, we will both fight her, you with your axe and I with my sword." "The witch is destroyed," announced the Scarecrow, and as they walked away, he told the Tin Soldier of much that had happened in the land of Oz since he had stood rusted in the forest. "I must have stood there longer than I had imagined," he said thoughtfully. Chapter 17. The Workshop of Kusi. It was not more than 2 hours' journey to the house where Nimmie Amee had lived, but when our travellers arrived there, they found the place deserted. The door was partly off its hinges, the roof had fallen in at the rear, and the interior of the cottage was thick with dust. Not only was the place vacant, but it was evident that no one had lived there for a long time. "I suppose," said the Scarecrow, as they all stood looking wonderingly at the ruined house, "that after the Wicked Witch was destroyed, Nimmie Amee became lonely and went somewhere else to live." "One could scarcely expect a young girl to live all alone in a forest," added Woot. "She would want company, of course, and so I believe she has gone where other people live. And perhaps she is still crying her little poor heart out because no tin man comes to marry her," suggested Polychrome. "Well, in that case, it is the clear duty of you two tin persons to seek Nimmie Amee until you find her," declared the Scarecrow. "I do not know where to look for the girl," said the Tin Soldier, "for I am almost a stranger to this part of the country." "I was born here," said the Tin Woodman, "but the forest has few inhabitants except the wild beasts. I cannot think of anyone living near here with whom Nimmie Amee might care to live." Why not go to Kuklip and ask him what has become of the girl, proposed Polychrome. That struck them all as being a good suggestion, so once more they started to tramp through the forest, taking the direct path to Kuklip's house, for both the Tin twins knew the way, having followed it many times. Kuklip lived at the far edge of the great forest, his house facing the broad plains of the Munchkin country that lay to the eastward. But when they came to this residence by the forest's edge, the tinsmith was not at home. It was a pretty place, all painted dark blue with trimmings of lighter blue. There was a neat blue fence around the yard, and several blue benches had been placed underneath the shady blue trees which marked the line between forest and plain. There was a blue lawn before the house, which was a good-sized building. Kuklip lived in the front part of the house and had his workshop in the back part, where he had also built a lean-to addition in order to give him more room. Although they found the tinsmith absent on their arrival, there was smoke coming out of his chimney, which proved that he would soon return. "And perhaps Nimmie Amee will be with him," said the Scarecrow in a cheerful voice. While they waited, the Tin Woodman went to the door of the workshop and, finding it unlocked, entered and looked curiously around the room where he had been made. "It seems almost like home to me," he told his friends who had followed him in. "The first time I came here I had lost a leg, so I had to carry it in my hand while I hopped on the other leg all the way from the place in the forest where the enchanted axe cut me. I remember that old Kuklip carefully put my meat leg into a barrel. I think that is the same barrel still standing in the corner yonder, and then at once he began to make a tin leg for me. He worked fast and with skill, and I was much interested in the job. My experience was much the same," said the tin soldier. "I used to bring all the parts of me, which the enchanted sword had cut away, here to the tinsmith, and Kuklip would put them into the barrel." "I wonder," said Woot, "if those cast-off parts of you two unfortunates are still in that barrel in the corner." "I suppose so," replied the Tin Woodman. "In the land of Oz, no part of a living creature can ever be destroyed." "If that is true, how was that wicked witch destroyed?" inquired Woot. "Why, she was very old and was all dried up and withered before Oz became a fairyland," explained the Scarecrow. "Only her magic arts had kept her alive so long, and when Dorothy's house fell upon her, she just turned to dust and was blown away and scattered by the wind. I do not think, however, that the parts cut away from these two young men could ever be entirely destroyed, and if they are still in those barrels, they are likely to be just the same as when the enchanted axe or sword severed them." "It doesn't matter, however," said the Tin Woodman. "Our tin bodies are more brilliant and durable and quite satisfy us." "Yes, the tin bodies are best," agreed the tin soldier. "Nothing can hurt them, unless they get dented or rusted," said Woot. But both the tin men frowned on him. Scraps of tin of all shapes and sizes lay scattered around the workshop. Also there were hammers and anvils and soldering irons, and a charcoal furnace and many other tools such as a tinsmith works with. Against two of the side walls had been built stout workbenches, and in the centre of the room was a long table. At the end of the shop, which adjoined the dwelling, were several cupboards. After examining the interior of the workshop until his curiosity was satisfied, Woot said, "I think I will go outside until Kuklip comes. It does not seem quite proper for us to take possession of his house while he is absent." "That is true," agreed the Scarecrow, and they were all about to leave the room when the Tin Woodman said, "Wait a minute," and they halted in obedience to the command. Chapter 18. The Tin Woodman Talks to Himself. The Tin Woodman had just noticed the cupboards and was curious to know what they contained, so he went to one of them and opened the door. There were shelves inside, and upon one of the shelves, which was about on a level with his tin chin, the Emperor discovered a head. It looked like a doll's head, only it was larger, and he soon saw it was the head of some person. It was facing the Tin Woodman, and as the cupboard door swung back, the eyes of the head slowly opened and looked at him. The Tin Woodman was not at all surprised, for in the land of Oz, one runs into magic at every turn. "Dear me," said the Tin Woodman, staring hard. "It seems as if I had met you somewhere before. Good morning, sir." "You have the advantage of me," replied the head. "I never saw you before in my life." "Still, your face is very familiar," persisted the Tin Woodman. "Pardon me, but may I ask if you ever had a body?" "Yes, at one time," answered the head, "but that is so long ago I can't remember it." "Did you think," with a pleasant smile, "that I was born just as I am? That a head would be created without a body?" "No, of course not," said the other. "But how came you to lose your body?" "Well, I can't recollect the details. You have to ask Kuklip about it," returned the head. "For curious as it may seem to you, my memory is not as good since my separation from the rest of me. I still possess my brains, and my intellect is as good as ever, but my memory of some of the events I formerly experienced is quite hazy." "How long have you been in this cupboard?" asked the Emperor. "I don't know." "Haven't you a name?" "Oh yes," said the head. "I used to be called Nick Chopper when I was a woodman and cut down trees for a living." "Good gracious," cried the Tin Woodman in astonishment. "If you are Nick Chopper's head, then you are me, or I'm you, or what relation are we anyhow?" "Don't ask me," replied the head. "For my part, I am not anxious to claim relationship with any common, manufactured article like you. You may be all right in your class, but your class isn't my class. You're tin." The poor Emperor felt so bewildered that for a time he could only stare at his old head in silence. Then he said, "I must admit that I wasn't at all bad looking before I became tin. You're almost handsome, for meat. If your hair was combed, you'd be quite attractive." "How do you expect me to comb my hair without help?" demanded the head indignantly. "I used to keep it smooth and neat when I had arms, but after I was removed from the rest of me, my hair got messed, and old Kuklip never has combed it for me." "I'll speak to him about it," said the Tin Woodman. "Do you remember loving a pretty Munchkin girl named Nimmie Amee?" "No," answered the head. "That is a foolish question. The heart in my body, when I had a body, might have loved someone for all I know, but a head isn't made to love. It's made to think." "Oh, do you think then? I used to think. You must have been shut up in this cupboard for years and years. What have you thought about in all that time?" "Nothing." "That's another foolish question. A little reflection will convince you that I have had nothing to think about, except the boards on the inside of the cupboard door, and it didn't take me long to think of everything about those boards that could be thought of. Then, of course, I quit thinking." "Are you happy?" "Happy? What's that?" "Don't you know what happiness is?" inquired the Tin Woodman. "I haven't the faintest idea whether it's round or square, or black or white, or whatever it is. And, if you will pardon my lack of interest in it, I will say that I don't care." The Tin Woodman was much puzzled by these answers. His travelling companions had grouped themselves at his back, and had fixed their eyes on the head, and listened to the conversation with much interest. But until now, they had not interrupted because they thought the Tin Woodman had the best right to talk to his own head and renew acquaintance with it. "But now," the Tin Soldier remarked, "I wonder if my old head happens to be in any of these cupboards." And he proceeded to open all the cupboard doors. But no other head was to be found on any of the shelves. "Oh well, never mind," said Woot the Wanderer. "I can't imagine what anyone wants of a cast-off head anyhow." "I can understand the soldier's interest," asserted Polychrome, dancing around the grimy workshop until her draperies formed a cloud around her dainty form. "For sentimental reasons, a man might like to see his old head once more, just as one likes to revisit an old home. And then to kiss it goodbye, added the Scarecrow. I hope that tin thing won't try to kiss me goodbye, exclaimed the Tin Woodman's former head, and I don't see what right you folks have to disturb my peace and comfort either. You belong to me, the Tin Woodman declared. I do not. You and I are one. We've been parted, asserted the head. It will be unnatural for me to have any interest in a man made of tin. Please close the door and leave me alone. I did not think that my old head could be so disagreeable, said the Emperor. I'm quite ashamed of myself, meaning you. You ought to be glad that I've enough sense to know what my rights are, retorted the head. In this cupboard, I am leading a simple life, peaceful and dignified, and when a mob of people in whom I am not interested disturb me, they are the disagreeable ones, not I. With a sigh, the Tin Woodman closed and latched the cupboard door and turned away. Well, said the Tin Soldier, if my old head would have treated me as coldly and in so unfriendly a manner as your old head has treated you, friend Chopper, I'm glad I could not find it. Yes, I'm rather surprised at my head myself, replied the Tin Woodman thoughtfully. I thought I had a more pleasant disposition when I was made of meat. But just then, old Kuklip the tinsmith arrived, and he seemed surprised to find so many visitors. Kuklip was a stout man and a short man. He had his sleeves rolled above his elbows, showing muscular arms, and he wore a leathern apron that covered all the front of him, and was so long that Woot was surprised he didn't step on it and trip whenever he walked. And Kuklip had a grey beard that was almost as long as his apron, and his head was bald on top, and his ears stuck out from his head like two fans. Over his eyes, which were bright and twinkling, he wore big spectacles. It was easy to see that the tinsmith was a kind-hearted man, as well as a merry and agreeable one. "Oh-ho!" he cried in a joyous bass voice. "Here are both my tin men come to visit me, and they and their friends are welcome indeed. I'm very proud of you two characters, I assure you, for you are so perfect that you are proof that I'm a good workman. Sit down, all of you, if you can find anything to sit on, and tell me why you are here." So they found seats and told him all of their adventures that they thought he would like to know. Kuklip was glad to learn that Nick Chopper, the Tin Woodman, was now Emperor of the Winkies and a friend of Ozma of Oz, and the tinsmith was also interested in the Scarecrow and Polychrome. He turned the straw man around, examining him curiously, and patted him on all sides, and then said, "You are certainly wonderful, but I think you would be more durable and steady on your legs if you were made of tin. Would you like me to—" "No, indeed," interrupted the Scarecrow hastily. "I like myself better as I am." But to Polychrome the tinsmith said, "Nothing could improve you, my dear, for you are the most beautiful maiden I have ever seen. It is pure happiness just to look at you." "That is praise indeed from so skilful a workman," returned the Rainbow's daughter, laughing and dancing in and out the room. "Then it must be this boy you wish me to help," said Kuklip, looking at Woot. "No," said Woot, "we are not here to seek your skill, but have merely come to you for information." Then between them they related their search for Nimmie Amee, whom the Tin Woodman explained he had resolved to marry, yet who had promised to become the bride of the Tin Soldier before he unfortunately became rusted. And when the story was told, they asked Kuklip if he knew what had become of Nimmie Amee. "Not exactly," replied the old man, "but I know that she wept bitterly when the Tin Soldier did not come to marry her, as he had promised to do. The old witch was so provoked at the girl's tears that she beat Nimmie Amee with her crooked stick, and then hobbled away to gather some magic herbs, with which she intended to transform the girl into an old hag, so that no one would again love her or care to marry her. It was while she was away on this errand that Dorothy's house fell on the wicked witch, and she turned to dust and blew away. When I heard this good news, I sent Nimmie Amee to find the silver shoes, which the witch had worn, but Dorothy had taken them with her, to the Emerald City. Yes, we know all about those silver shoes, said the Scarecrow. Well, continued Kukulip, after that Nimmie Amee decided to go away from the forest and live with some people she was acquainted with who had a house on Mount Munch. I have never seen the girl since. Do you know the name of the people on Mount Munch with whom she went to live? Asked the Tin Woodman. No, Nimmie Amee did not mention her friend's name, and I did not ask her. She took with her all that she could carry of the goods that were in the witch's house, and she told me I could have the rest. But when I went there I found nothing worth taking except some magic powders that I did not know how to use, and a bottle of magic glue. What is magic glue? Asked Woot. It is a magic preparation with which to mend people when they cut themselves. One time, long ago, I cut off one of my fingers by accident, and I carried it to the witch, who took down her bottle and glued it on again for me. See? Showing them his finger. It is as good as ever it was. No one else that I ever heard of had this magic glue, and of course, when Nick Chopper cut himself to pieces with his enchanted axe, and Captain Fighter cut himself to pieces with his enchanted sword, the witch would not mend them, or allow me to glue them together, because she had herself wickedly enchanted the axe and sword. Nothing remained but for me to make them new parts out of tin, but as you can see, tin answered the purpose very well, and I'm sure their tin bodies are a great improvement on their meat bodies. Very true, said the Tin Soldier. I quite agree with you, said the Tin Woodman. I happened to find my old head in your cupboard a while ago, and certainly it is not as desirable a head as the tin one I now wear. By the way, said the Tin Soldier, whatever became of my old head, Kukulip? And of the different parts of our bodies, added the Tin Woodman. Let me think a minute, replied Kukulip. If I remember right, you two boys used to bring me most of your parts when they were cut off, and I saved them in that barrel in the corner. You must not have brought me all the parts, for when I made Chop Fight, I had hard work finding enough pieces to complete the job. I finally had to finish him with one arm. Who is Chop Fight? Inquired Woot. Oh, haven't I told you about Chop Fight? Exclaimed Kukulip. Of course not, and he's quite a curiosity too. You'll be interested in hearing about Chop Fight. This is how it happened. One day, after the witch had been destroyed and Nimmie Amee had gone to live with her friend on Mount Munch, I was looking around the shop for something and came upon the bottle of magic glue which I had brought from the old witch's house. It occurred to me to piece together the odds and ends of you two people, which of course were just as good as ever, and see if I could make a man out of them. If I succeeded, I would have an assistant to help me with my work, and I thought it would be a clever idea to put some practical use to the scraps of Nick Chopper and Captain Fighter. There were two perfectly good heads in my cupboard, and a lot of feet and legs and parts of bodies in the barrel, so I set to work to see what I could do. First, I pieced together a body, gluing it with the witch's magic glue, which worked perfectly. That was the hardest part of my job, however, because the bodies didn't match up well and some parts were missing. But by using a piece of Captain Fighter here and a piece of Nick Chopper there, I finally got together a very decent body, with heart and all the trimmings complete. Whose heart did you use in making the body? Asked the Tin Woodman anxiously. I can't tell, for the parts had no tags on them, and one heart looks much like another. After the body was completed, I glued two fine legs and feet onto it. One leg was Nick Chopper's and one was Captain Fighter's. And, finding one leg longer than the other, I trimmed it down to make them match. I was much disappointed to find that I had but one arm. There was an extra leg in the barrel, but I could find only one arm. Having glued this onto the body, I was ready for the head, and I had some difficulty in making up my mind which head to use. Finally, I shut my eyes and reached out my hand toward the cupboard shelf, and the first head I touched, I glued upon my new man. It was mine, declared the Tin Soldier gloomily. No, it was mine, asserted Kukulip, for I had given you another in exchange for it. the beautiful tin head you now wear. When the glue had dried, my man was quite an interesting fellow. I named him Chopfight, using a part of Nick Chopper's name and a part of Captain Fighter's name, because he was a mixture of both your cast of parts. Chopfight was interesting, as I said, but he did not prove a very agreeable companion. He complained bitterly because I had given him but one arm, as if it were my fault, and he grumbled because the suit of blue Munchkin clothes, which I got for him from a neighbour, did not fit him perfectly. "Ah, that was because he was wearing my old head," remarked the tin soldier. "I remember that head used to be very particular about its clothes." As an assistant, the old tinsmith continued, Chopfight was not a success. He was awkward with tools and was always hungry. He demanded something to eat 6 or 8 times a day, so I wondered if I had fitted the insides of him properly. Indeed, Chopfight ate so much that little food was left for myself, so when he proposed one day to go out into the world to seek adventures, I was delighted to be rid of him. I even made him a tin arm to take the place of the missing one, and that pleased him very much, so that we parted good friends. "What became of Chopfight after that?" the Scarecrow inquired. "I never heard. He started off towards the east into the plains of the Munchkin Country, and that was the last I ever saw of him." "It seems to me," said the Tin Woodman reflectively, "that you did wrong in making a man out of our cast of parts. It is evident that Chopfight could, with justice, claim relationship with both of us." "Don't worry about that," advised Kuklip cheerfully. "It is not likely that you will ever meet the fellow, and if you should meet him, he doesn't know who he is made of, for I never told him the secret of his manufacture." "Indeed, you are the only ones who know of it, and you may keep the secret to yourselves if you wish to." "Never mind Chopfight," said the Scarecrow. "Our business now is to find poor Nimmie Amee and let her choose her tin husband. To do that, it seems, from the information Kuklip has given us, we must travel to Mount Munch." "If that's the program, let us start at once," suggested Woot. So they all went outside, where they found Polychrome dancing about among the trees and talking with the birds and laughing as merrily as if she had not lost her rainbow, and so been separated from all her fairy sisters. They told her they were going to Mount Munch, and she replied, "Very well, I am as likely to find my rainbow there as here, and any other place is as likely as there. It all depends on the weather. Do you think it looks like rain?" They shook their heads, and Polychrome laughed again and danced on after them when they resumed their journey. Chapter 19. The Invisible Country. They were proceeding so easily and comfortably on their way to Mount Munch that Woot said in a serious tone of voice, "I'm afraid something is going to happen." "Why?" asked Polychrome, dancing around the group of travellers. "Because," said the boy thoughtfully, "I've noticed that when we have the least reason for getting into trouble, something is sure to go wrong. Just now the weather is delightful, the grass is beautifully blue and quite soft to our feet. The mountain we are seeking shows clearly in the distance, and there is no reason anything should happen to delay us in getting there. Our troubles all seem to be over, and, well, that's why I'm afraid," he added, with a sigh. "Dear me," remarked the Scarecrow, "what unhappy thoughts you have, to be sure. This is proof that born brains cannot equal manufactured brains, for my brains dwell only on facts and never borrow trouble. When there is occasion for my brains to think, they think, but I would be ashamed of my brains if they kept shooting out thoughts that were merely fears and imaginings, such as do no good, but are likely to do harm. For my part," said the Tin Woodman, "I do not think at all, but allow my velvet heart to guide me at all times." The tinsmith filled my hollow head with scraps and clippings of tin, said the soldier, and he told me they would do nicely for brains. But when I began to think, the tin scraps rattle around and get so mixed that I'm soon bewildered. so I try not to think. My tin heart is almost as useless to me, for it is hard and cold, so I'm sure the red velvet heart of my friend Nick Chopper is a better guide. Thoughtless people are not unusual, observed the Scarecrow, but I consider them more fortunate than those who have useless or wicked thoughts and do not try to curb them. Your oil can, friend Woodman, is filled with oil, but you only apply the oil to your joints, drop by drop, as you need it, and do not keep spilling it where it will do no good. Thoughts should be restrained in the same way as your oil, and only applied as necessary and for a good purpose. If used carefully, thoughts are good things to have. Polychrome laughed at him, for the Rainbow's Daughter knew more about thoughts than the Scarecrow did, but the others were solemn, feeling they had been rebuked, and tramped on in silence. Suddenly Woot, who was in the lead, looked around and found that all his comrades had mysteriously disappeared. But where could they have gone to? The broad plain was all about him, and there were neither trees nor bushes that could hide even a rabbit, nor any hole for one to fall into. Yet there he stood, alone. Surprise had caused him to halt, and with a thoughtful and puzzled expression on his face, he looked down at his feet. It startled him anew to discover that he had no feet. He reached out his hands, but he could not see them. He could feel his hands and arms and body. He stamped his feet on the grass and knew they were there, but in some strange way they had become invisible. While Woot stood wondering, a crash of metal sounded in his ears, and he heard two heavy bodies tumble to the earth just beside him. "Good gracious!" exclaimed the voice of the Tin Woodman. "Mercy me!" cried the voice of the Tin Soldier. "Why didn't you look where you are going?" asked the Tin Woodman reproachfully. "I did, but I couldn't see you," said the Tin Soldier. "Something has happened to my tin eyes. I can't see you, even now, nor can I see anyone else." "It's the same way with me," admitted the Tin Woodman. Woot couldn't see them either, although he heard them plainly, and just then something smashed against him unexpectedly and knocked him over. But it was only the straw-stuffed body of the Scarecrow that fell upon him, and while he could not see the Scarecrow, he managed to push him off and rose to his feet, just as Polychrome whirled against him and made him tumble again. Sitting upon the ground, the boy asked, "Can you see us, Polly?" "No, indeed," answered the Rainbow's Daughter. "We've all become invisible." "How did it happen, do you suppose?" inquired the Scarecrow, lying where he had fallen. "We have met with no enemy," answered Polychrome, "so it must be that this part of the country has the magic quality of making people invisible, even fairies falling under the charm. We can see the grass and the flowers and the stretch of plain before us, and we can still see Mount Munch in the distance, but we cannot see ourselves or one another." "Well, what are we to do about it?" demanded Woot. "I think this magic affects only a small part of the plain," replied Polychrome. "Perhaps there is only a streak of the country where an enchantment makes people become invisible. So, if we get together and hold hands, we can travel toward Mount Munch until the enchanted streak is past." "All right," said Woot, jumping up. "Give me your hand, Polychrome." "Where are you?" "Here," she answered. "Whistle, Woot, and keep whistling until I come to you." So Woot whistled, and presently Polychrome found him and grasped his hand. "Someone must help me up," said the Scarecrow, lying near them. So they found the straw man and sat him upon his feet, after which he held fast to Polychrome's other hand. Nick Chopper and the Tin Soldier had managed to scramble up without assistance, but it was awkward for them, and the Tin Woodman said, "I don't seem to stand straight somehow, but my joints all work, so I guess I can walk." Guided by his voice, they reached his side, where Woot grasped his tin fingers so they might keep together. The tin soldier was standing nearby, and the Scarecrow soon touched him and took hold of his arm. "I hope you're not wobbly," said the straw man, "for if two of us walk unsteadily, we will be sure to fall." "I'm not wobbly," the tin soldier assured him, "but I'm certain that one of my legs is shorter than the other. I can't see it to tell what's gone wrong, but I'll limp on with the rest of you until we are out of this enchanted territory." They now formed a line, holding hands, and turning their faces toward Mount Munch, resumed their journey. They had not gone far, however, when a terrible growl saluted their ears. The sound seemed to come from a place just in front of them, so they halted abruptly and remained silent, listening with all their ears. "I smell straw," cried a hoarse, harsh voice, with more growls and snarls. "I smell straw, and I'm a giraffe who loves straw and eats all he can find. I want to eat this straw. Where is it? Where is it?" The Scarecrow, hearing this, trembled, but kept silent. All the others were silent too, hoping that the invisible beast would be unable to find them. But the creature sniffed the odor of the straw and drew nearer and nearer to them until he reached the Tin Woodman on one end of the line. It was a big beast, and it smelled of the Tin Woodman and grated 2 rows of enormous teeth around the Emperor's tin body. "Bah, that's not straw," said the harsh voice, and the beast advanced along the line to Woot. "Meat? Oh, you're no good. I can't eat meat," grumbled the beast, and passed on to Polychrome. "Sweetmeats and perfume, cobwebs and dew, nothing to eat in a fairy like you," said the creature. Now, the Scarecrow was next to Polychrome in the line, and he realized if the beast devoured his straw, he would be helpless for a long time because the last farmhouse was far behind them, and only grass covered the vast expanse of plain. So in his fright, he let go of Polychrome's hand and put the hand of the tin soldier in that of the Rainbow's daughter. Then he slipped back of the line and went to the other end, where he silently seized the Tin Woodman's hand. Meantime, the beast had smelled the tin soldier and found he was the last of the line. "That's funny," growled the hippo giraffe. "I can smell straw, but I can't find it. Well, it's here somewhere, and I must hunt around until I do find it, for I'm hungry." His voice was now at the left of them, so they started on, hoping to avoid him, and travelled as fast as they could in the direction of Mount Munch. "I don't like this invisible country," said Woot with a shudder. "We can't tell how many dreadful invisible beasts are roaming around us, or what danger we'll come to next." "Quit thinking about danger, please," said the Scarecrow warningly. "Why?" asked the boy. "If you think of some dreadful thing, it's liable to happen. But if you don't think of it, and no one else thinks of it, it just can't happen. Do you see?" "No," answered Woot. "I won't be able to see much of anything until we escape from this enchantment." But they got out of the invisible strip of country as suddenly as they had entered it, and the instant they got out, they stopped short, for just before them was a deep ditch, running at right angles as far as their eyes could see, and stopping all further progress toward Mount Munch. "It's not so very wide," said Woot, "but I'm sure none of us can jump across it." Polychrome began to laugh, and the Scarecrow said, "What's the matter?" "Look at the Tin Men," she said, with another burst of merry laughter. Woot and the Scarecrow looked, and the Tin Men looked at themselves. "It was the collision," said the Tin Woodman regretfully. "I knew something was wrong with me, and now I can see that my side is dented in, so that I lean over toward the left. It was the soldier's fault. He shouldn't have been so careless." "It is your fault that my right leg is bent, making it shorter than the other, so that I limp badly," retorted the soldier. "You shouldn't have stood where I was walking. You shouldn't have walked where I was standing," replied the Tin Woodman. "It was almost a quarrel." So Polychrome said soothingly, Never mind, friends. As soon as we have time, I'm sure we can straighten the soldier's leg and get the dent out of the woodman's body. The Scarecrow needs patting into shape too, for he had a bad tumble. But our first task is to get over this ditch. Yes, the ditch is the most important thing just now, added Woot. They were standing in a row, looking hard at the unexpected barrier, when a fierce growl from behind them made them all turn quickly. Out of the invisible country marched a huge beast with a thick, leathery skin and a surprisingly long neck. The head on the top of this neck was broad and flat, and the eyes and mouth were very big, and the nose and ears very small. When the head was drawn down toward the beast's shoulders, the neck was all wrinkles, but the head could shoot up now, very high indeed, if the creature wished it to. "Dear me," exclaimed the Scarecrow, "this must be the hippo-giraffe." "Quite right," said the beast, "and you're the straw which I'm to eat for my dinner. Oh, how I love straw. I hope you don't resent my affectionate appetite." With its 4 great legs, it advanced straight toward the Scarecrow, but the Tin Woodman and the Tin Soldier both sprang in front of their friend and flourished their weapons. "Keep off," said the Tin Woodman warningly, "or I'll chop you with my axe." "Keep off," said the Tin Soldier, "or I'll cut you with my sword." "Would you really do that?" asked the Hippo-Giraffe in a disappointed voice. "We would," they both replied, and the Tin Woodman added, "The Scarecrow is our friend, and he would be useless without his straw stuffing. So, as we are comrades, faithful and true, we will defend our friend's stuffing against all enemies." The Hippo-Giraffe sat down and looked at them sorrowfully. When one has made up his mind to have a meal of delicious straw, and then finds he can't have it, it is certainly hard luck, he said. "And what good is the straw man to you or to himself when the ditch keeps you from going any further?" "Well, we can go back again," suggested Woot. "True," said the Hippo, "and if you do, you'll be as disappointed as I am. That's some comfort anyhow." The travellers looked at the beast, and then they looked across the ditch at the level plain beyond. On the other side, the grass had grown tall, and the sun had dried it, so there was a fine crop of hay that only needed to be cut and stacked. "Why don't you cross over and eat hay?" the boy asked the beast. "I'm not fond of hay," replied the Hippo-Giraffe. "Straw is much more delicious to my notion, and it's more scarce in this neighbourhood too. Also, I must confess that I can't get across the ditch, for my body is too heavy and clumsy for me to jump the distance. I can stretch my neck across, though, and you will notice that I've nibbled the hay on the farther edge, not because I liked it, but because one must eat, and if one can't get the sort of food he desires, he must take what is offered or go hungry." "Ah, I see you are a philosopher," remarked the Scarecrow. "No, I'm just a Hippo-Giraffe," was the reply. Polychrome was not afraid of the big beast. She danced close to him and said, "If you can stretch your neck across the ditch, why not help us over? We can sit on your big head one at a time, and then you can lift us across." "Yes, I can, it's true," answered the Hippo, "but I refuse to do it. Unless," he added, and stopped short. "Unless what?" asked Polychrome. "Unless you first allow me to eat the straw with which the Scarecrow is stuffed." "No," said the Rainbow's Daughter, "that is too high a price to pay. Our friend Straw is nice and fresh, for he was restuffed only a little while ago." "I know," agreed the Hippo-Giraffe. "That's why I want it. If it was old, musty straw, I wouldn't care for it." "Please lift us across," pleaded Polychrome. "No," replied the beast. "Since you refuse my generous offer, I can be as stubborn as you are." After that, they were all silent for a time. But then the Scarecrow said bravely, "Friends, let us agree to the beast's terms. Give him my straw and carry the rest of me with you across the ditch. Once on the other side, the Tin Soldier can cut some of the hay with his sharp sword, and you can stuff me with the material until we reach a place where there is straw. It is true I have been stuffed with straw all my life, and it will be somewhat humiliating to be filled with common hay, but I am willing to sacrifice my pride in a good cause. Moreover, to abandon our errand and so deprive the great emperor of the Winkies, or this noble soldier, of his pride, would be equally humiliating, if not more so. "You're a very honest and clever man," exclaimed the Hippogiraffe, admiringly. "When I have eaten your head, perhaps I will also become clever." "You're not to eat my head, you know," returned the Scarecrow hastily. "My head isn't stuffed with straw, and I cannot part with it. When one loses his head, he loses his brains." "Very well then, you may keep your head," said the beast. The Scarecrow's companions thanked him warmly for his loyal sacrifice to their mutual good, and then he laid down and permitted them to pull the straw from his body. As fast as they did this, the Hippogiraffe ate up the straw, and when all was consumed, Polychrome made a neat bundle of the clothes and boots and gloves and hat, and said she would carry them, while Woot tucked the Scarecrow's head under his arm and promised to guard its safety. "Now then," said the Tin Woodman, "keep your promise, beast, and lift us over the ditch." But that was a fine dinner," said the Scarecrow, smacking his thick lips in satisfaction. "And I'm as good as my word. Sit on my head one at a time, and I'll land you safely on the other side." He approached close to the edge of the ditch and squatted down. Polychrome climbed over his big body and sat herself lightly upon the flat head, holding the bundle of the Scarecrow's raiment in her hand. Slowly, the elastic neck stretched out until it reached the far side of the ditch, when the beast lowered his head and permitted the beautiful fairy to leap to the ground. Woot made the queer journey next, and then the Tin Soldier and the Tin Woodman went over, and all were well pleased to have overcome this serious barrier to their progress. "Now, soldier, cut the hay," said the Scarecrow's head, which was still held by Woot the Wanderer. "I'd like to, but I can't stoop over with my bent leg without falling," replied Captain Fighter. "What can we do about that leg anyhow?" asked Woot, appealing to Polychrome. She danced around in a circle several times without replying, and the boy feared she had not heard him. But the Rainbow's daughter was merely thinking upon the problem, and presently she paused beside the Tin Soldier and said, "I've been taught a little fairy magic, but I've never before been asked to mend tin legs with it, so I'm not sure I can help you. It all depends on the goodwill of my unseen fairy guardians, so I'll try, and if I fail, you will be no worse off than you are now." She danced around the circle again, and then laid both hands upon the twisted tin leg, and sang in her sweet voice, "Fairy powers, come to my aid, this bent leg of tin is made, make it straight and strong and true, and I'll render thanks to you." "Ah," murmured Captain Fighter in a glad voice, as she withdrew her hand and danced away, and they saw he was standing straight as ever, because his leg was as shapely and strong as it had been before his accident. The Tin Woodman had watched Polychrome with much interest, and he now said, "Please take the dent out of my side, Polly, for I am more crippled than was the soldier." So the Rainbow's daughter touched his side lightly and sang, "Here's a dent by accident, such a thing was never meant. Fairy powers so wondrous great, make our dear Tin Woodman straight." "Good," cried the Emperor, standing again erect and strutting around to show his fine figure. "Your fairy magic may not be able to accomplish all things, sweet Polychrome, but it works splendidly on tin. Thank you very much." "The hay," pleaded the Scarecrow's head. "Oh, yes, the hay," said Woot. "What are you waiting for, Captain Fighter?" At once the Tin Soldier set to work, cutting hay with his sword, and in a few minutes there was quite enough with which to stuff the Scarecrow's body. Woot and Polychrome did this, and it was no easy task, because the hay packed together more than straw, and as they had little experience in such work, their job, when completed, left the Scarecrow's arms and legs rather bunchy. Also, there was a hump on his back which made Woot laugh and say it reminded him of a camel, but it was the best they could do, and when the head was fastened onto the body, they asked the Scarecrow how he felt. A little heavy, and not quite natural, he cheerfully replied, but I'll get along somehow until we reach a straw stack. Don't laugh at me, please, because I'm a little ashamed of myself, and I don't want to regret a good action. They started at once in the direction of Mount Munch, and as the Scarecrow proved very clumsy in his movements, Woot took one of his arms and the Tin Woodman the other, and so helped their friend to walk in a straight line. And the Rainbow's Daughter, as before, danced ahead of them, and behind them, and all around them, and they never minded her odd ways, because, to them, she was like a ray of sunshine. Chapter 20. Overnight. The land of the Munchkins is full of surprises, as our travellers had already learned, and although Mount Munch was constantly growing larger as they advanced toward it, they knew it was still a long way off and were not certain, by any means, that they had escaped all danger or encountered their last adventure. The plain was broad, and as far as the eye could see, there seemed to be a level stretch of country between them and the mountain, but toward evening they came upon a hollow in which stood a tiny blue Munchkin dwelling with a garden around it and fields of grain filling in all the rest of the hollow. They did not discover this place until they came close to the edge of it, and they were astonished at the sight that greeted them, because they had imagined that this part of the plain had no inhabitants. "It's a very small house," Woot declared. "I wonder who lives there." "The way to find out is to knock on the door and ask," replied the Tin Woodman. "Perhaps it is the home of Nimmie Amee." "Is she a dwarf?" asked the boy. "No, indeed, Nimmie Amee is a full-sized woman." "Then I'm sure she couldn't live in that little house," said Woot. "Let's go down," suggested the Scarecrow. "I'm almost sure I can see a straw stack in the backyard." They descended the hollow, which was rather steep at the sides, and soon came to the house, which was indeed rather small. Woot knocked upon a door that was not much higher than his waist, but got no reply. He knocked again, but not a sound was heard. "Smoke is coming out of the chimney," announced Polychrome, who was dancing lightly through the garden, where cabbages and beets and turnips and the like were growing finely. "Then someone surely lives here," said Woot, and knocked again. Now a window at the side of the house opened and a queer head appeared. It was white and hairy, and had a long snout and little round eyes. The ears were hidden by a blue sunbonnet tied under the chin. "Oh, it's a pig!" exclaimed Woot. "Pardon me, I am Mrs. Squilina Swine, wife of Professor Grunter Swine, and this is our home," said the one in the window. "What do you want?" "What sort of a professor is your husband?" inquired the Tin Woodman, curiously. "He is professor of cabbage culture and corn perfection. He is very famous in his own family, and would be the wonder of the world if he went abroad," said Mrs. Swine, in a voice that was half proud and half irritable. "I must inform you intruders that the professor is a dangerous individual, for he files his teeth every morning until they are sharp as needles. If you are butchers, you'd better run away and avoid trouble." "We are not butchers," said the Tin Woodman assuringly to her. "Then what are you doing with that axe? And why has the other Tin Man a sword?" "They are the only weapons we have to defend our friends from their enemies," explained the Emperor of the Winkies, and Woot added, "Do not be afraid of us, Mrs. Swine, for we are harmless travellers. The Tin Men and the Scarecrow never eat anything, and Polychrome feasts only on dewdrops. As for me, I'm rather hungry, but There is plenty of food in your garden to satisfy me." Professor Swine now joined his wife at the window, looking rather scared in spite of the boy's assuring speech. He wore a blue Munchkin hat with pointed crown and broad brim, and big spectacles covered his eyes. He peeked around from behind his wife, and after looking hard at the strangers, he said, "My wisdom assures me that you are merely travellers, as you say, and not butchers. Butchers have reason to be afraid of me, but you are safe. We cannot invite you in, for you are too big for our house, but the boy who eats is welcome to all the carrots and turnips he wants. Make yourselves at home in the garden and stay all night if you like, but in the morning you must go away, for we are quiet people and do not care for company." "May I have some of your straw?" asked the Scarecrow. "Help yourself," replied Professor Swine. "For pigs, they're quite respectable," remarked Woot, as they all went toward the straw stack. "I'm glad they didn't invite us in," said Captain Fighter. "I hope I'm not too particular about my associates, but I draw the line at pigs." The Scarecrow was glad to be rid of his hay, for during the long walk it had sagged down and made him fat and squatty, and more bumpy than at first. "I'm not specially proud," he said, "but I love a manly figure, such as only straw stuffing can create. I've not felt like myself since that hungry hippo ate my last straw." Polychrome and Woot set to work removing the hay, and then they selected the finest straw, crisp and golden, and with it stuffed the Scarecrow anew. He certainly looked better after the operation, and he was so pleased at being reformed that he tried to dance a little jig, and almost succeeded. "I shall sleep under this straw stack tonight," Woot decided, after he had eaten some of the vegetables from the garden, and in fact he slept very well, with the two Tin Men and the Scarecrow sitting silently beside him, and Polychrome away somewhere in the moonlight, dancing her fairy dances. At daybreak, the Tin Woodman and the Tin Soldier took occasion to polish their bodies and oil their joints, for both were exceedingly careful of their personal appearance. They had forgotten the quarrel, due to their accidental bumping of one another in the invisible country, and being now good friends, the Tin Woodman polished the Tin Soldier's back for him, and then the Tin Soldier polished the Tin Woodman's back. For breakfast, the Wanderer ate crisp lettuce and radishes, and the Rainbow's Daughter, who had now returned to her friends, sipped the dewdrops that had formed on the petals of the wild flowers. As they passed the little house to renew their journey, Woot called out, "Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Swine." The window opened and the two pigs looked out. "A pleasant journey," said the Professor. "Have you any children?" asked the Scarecrow, who was a great friend of children. "We have 9, answered the Professor, "but they do not live with us, for when they were tiny piglets, the Wizard of Oz came here and offered to care for them and to educate them. So we let him have our 9 tiny piglets, for he's a good wizard and can be relied upon to keep his promises." "I know the 9 tiny piglets," said the Tin Woodman. "So do I," said the Scarecrow. "They still live in the Emerald City, and the wizard takes good care of them and teaches them to do all sorts of tricks." "Did they ever grow up?" inquired Mrs. Squilina Swine, in an anxious voice. "No," answered the Scarecrow. "Like all other children in the land of Oz, they will always remain children. And in the case of the tiny piglets, that is a good thing, because they would not be nearly so cute and cunning if they were bigger." "But are they happy?" asked Mrs. Swine. "Everyone in the Emerald City is happy," said the Tin Woodman. "They can't help it." Then the travellers said goodbye and climbed the side of the basin that was toward Mount Munch. Chapter 21. Polychrome's Magic. On this morning, which ought to be the last of this important journey, our friend started away as bright and cheery as could be, and Woot whistled a merry tune so that Polychrome could dance to the music. On reaching the top of the hill, the plain spread out before them in all its beauty of blue grasses and wild flowers, and Mount Munch seemed much nearer than it had the previous evening. They trudged on at a brisk pace, and by noon the mountain was so close that they could admire its appearance. Its slopes were partly clothed with pretty evergreens, and its foothills were tufted with a slender waving blue grass that had a tassel on the end of every blade. And, for the first time, they perceived near the foot of the mountain a charming house, not of great size, but neatly painted and with many flowers surrounding it, and vines climbing over the doors and windows. It was toward this solitary house that our travellers now directed their steps, thinking to inquire of the people who lived there where Nimmie Amee might be found. There were no paths, but the way was quite open and clear, and they were drawing near to the dwelling when Woot the Wanderer, who was then in the lead of the little party, halted with such an abrupt jerk that he stumbled over backward and lay flat on his back in the meadow. The Scarecrow stopped to look at the boy. "Why did you do that?" he asked in surprise. Woot sat up and gazed around him in amazement. I don't know," he replied. The two tin men, arm in arm, started to pass them when both halted and tumbled, with a great clatter, into a heap beside Woot. Polychrome, laughing at the absurd sight, came dancing up, and she also came to a sudden stop, but managed to save herself from falling. Every one of them was much astonished, and the Scarecrow said with a puzzled look, "I don't see anything." "Nor I," said Woot, "but something hit me just the same." "Some invisible person struck me a heavy blow," declared the Tin Woodman, struggling to separate himself from the Tin Soldier, whose legs and arms were mixed with his own. "I'm not sure it was a person," said Polychrome, looking more grave than usual. "It seems to me that I merely ran into some hard substance which barred my way. In order to make sure of this, let me try another place." She ran back away and then, with much caution, advanced in a different place. But when she reached a position on the line with the others, she halted, her arms outstretched before her. "I can feel something hard, something smooth as glass," she said, "but I'm sure it is not glass." "Let me try," suggested Woot, getting up. But when he tried to go forward, he discovered the same barrier that Polychrome had encountered. "No," he said, "it isn't glass. But what is it?" "Air," replied a small voice beside him. "Solid air, that's all." They all looked downward and found a sky-blue rabbit had stuck his head out of a burrow in the ground. The rabbit's eyes were a deeper blue than his fur, and the pretty creature seemed friendly and unafraid. "Air!" exclaimed Woot, staring in astonishment into the rabbit's blue eyes. "Whoever heard of air so solid that one cannot push it aside?" "You can't push this air aside," declared the rabbit, "for it was made hard by powerful sorcery, and it forms a wall that is intended to keep people from getting to that house yonder." "Oh, it's a wall, is it?" said the Tin Woodman. "Yes, it is really a wall," answered the rabbit, "and it is fully 6 feet thick." "How high is it?" inquired Captain Fighter, the Tin Soldier. "Oh, ever so high, perhaps a mile," said the rabbit. "Couldn't we go round it?" asked Woot. "Of course, for the wall is a circle," explained the rabbit. "In the centre of the circle stands the house, so you may walk around the wall of solid air, but you can't get to the house." "Who put the air wall around the house?" was the Scarecrow's question. "Nimmie Amee did that." "Nimmie Amee!" they all exclaimed in surprise. "Yes," answered the rabbit. "She used to live with an old witch who was suddenly destroyed, and when Nimmie Amee ran away from the witch's house, she took with her just one magic formula. Pure sorcery it was which enabled her to build this air wall around her house, the house yonder. It was quite a clever idea, I think, for it doesn't mar the beauty of the landscape, solid air being invisible, and yet it keeps all strangers away from the house." "Does Nimmie Amee live there now?" asked the Tin Woodman anxiously. "Yes, indeed," said the rabbit. And does she weep and wail from morning till night? Continued the Emperor. No, she seems quite happy, asserted the rabbit. The Tin Woodman seemed quite disappointed to hear this report of his old sweetheart, but the Scarecrow reassured his friend, saying, Never mind, Your Majesty. However happy Nimmie Amee is now, I'm sure she'll be much happier as Empress of the Winkies. Perhaps, said Captain Fighter somewhat stiffly, she will be still more happy to become the bride of a tin soldier. She shall choose between us, as we have agreed, the Tin Woodman promised. But how shall we get to the poor girl? Polychrome, although dancing lightly back and forth, had listened to every word of the conversation. Now she came forward and sat herself down just in front of the blue rabbit, her many-hued draperies giving her the appearance of some beautiful flower. The rabbit didn't back away an inch. Instead, he gazed at the Rainbow's Daughter admiringly. Does your burrow go underneath this wall of air? Asked Polychrome. To be sure, answered the blue rabbit. I dug it that way so that I could roam in these broad fields by going out one way, or eat the cabbages in Nimmie Amee's garden by leaving my burrow at the other end. I don't think Nimmie Amee ought to mind the little I take from her garden, or the hole I've made under her magic wall. A rabbit may go and come as he pleases, but no one who is bigger than I am could get through my burrow. Will you allow us to pass through if we are able to? Inquired Polychrome. Yes, indeed, answered the blue rabbit. I'm no especial friend of Nimmie Amee. For once she threw stones at me, just because I was nibbling some lettuce, and only yesterday she yelled shoo at me, which made me nervous. You're welcome to use my burrow in any way you choose. But this is all nonsense, declared Woot the Wanderer. We are every one too big to crawl through a rabbit's burrow. We are too big now, agreed the Scarecrow, but you must remember that Polychrome is a fairy, and fairies have many magical powers. Woot's face brightened as he turned to the lovely daughter of the rainbow. Could you make us all as small as that rabbit? He asked eagerly. I can try, answered Polychrome with a smile. And presently she did it, so easily that Woot was not the only one astonished. As the now tiny people grouped themselves before the rabbit's burrow, the hole appeared to them like the entrance to a tunnel, which indeed it was. I'll go first, said wee Polychrome, who had made herself grow as small as the others, and into the tunnel she danced without hesitation. The tiny Scarecrow went next, and then the two funny little tin men. Walk in, it's your turn, said the blue rabbit to Woot the Wanderer. I'm coming after to see how you get along. This will be a regular surprise party to Nimmie Amee. So Woot entered the hole and felt his way along its smooth sides in the dark until he finally saw the glimmer of daylight ahead and knew the journey was almost over. Had he remained his natural size, the distance could have been covered in a few steps, but to a thumb-high Woot, it was quite a promenade. When he emerged from the burrow, he found himself but a short distance from the house, in the centre of the vegetable garden, where the leaves of rhubarb, waving above his head, seemed like trees. Outside the hole, and waiting for him, he found all his friends. So far so good, remarked the Scarecrow cheerfully. Yes, so far, but no farther, returned the Tin Woodman in a plaintive and disturbed tone of voice. I am now close to Nimmie Amee, whom I have come ever so far to seek, but I cannot ask the girl to marry such a little man as I am now. I am no bigger than a toy soldier, said Captain Fighter sorrowfully. Unless Polychrome can make us big again, there is little use in our visiting Nimmie Amee at all, for I'm sure she wouldn't care for a husband she might carelessly step on and ruin. Polychrome laughed merrily. If I make you big, you can't get out of here again, said she, and if you remain little, Nimmie Amee will laugh at you. So make your choice. I think we'd better go back, said Woot seriously. No, said the Tin Woodman stoutly. "I have decided that it is my duty to make Nimmie Amee happy in case she wishes to marry me." "So have I," announced Captain Fighter. "A good soldier never shrinks from doing his duty." "As for that," said the Scarecrow, "Tin doesn't shrink any to speak of, under any circumstances. But Woot and I intend to stick to our comrades, whatever they decide to do, so we will ask Polychrome to make us as big as we were before." Polychrome agreed to this request, and in half a minute, all of them, including herself, had been enlarged again to their natural sizes. They then thanked the Blue Rabbit for his kind assistance, and at once approached the house of Nimmie Amee. Chapter 22. Nimmie Amee. We may be sure that at this moment our friends were all anxious to see the end of the adventure that had caused them so many trials and troubles. Perhaps the Tin Woodman's heart did not beat any faster because it was made of red velvet and stuffed with sawdust, and the Tin Soldier's heart was made of tin and reposed in his tin bosom without a hint of emotion. However, there is little doubt that they both knew that a critical moment in their lives had arrived, and that Nimmie Amee's decision was destined to influence the future of one or the other. As they assumed their natural sizes, and the rhubarb leaves that had before towered above their heads now barely covered their feet, they looked around the garden and found that no person was visible save themselves. No sound of activity came from the house either, but they walked to the front door, which had a little porch built before it, and there the two tin men stood side by side, while both knocked upon the door with their tin knuckles. As no one seemed eager to answer the summons, they knocked again, and then again. Finally, they heard a stir from within, and someone coughed. "Who's there?" called a girl's voice. "It's I," cried the tin twins together. "How did you get there?" asked the voice. They hesitated how to reply, so Woot answered for them. "By means of magic." "Oh," said the unseen girl. "Are you friends or foes?" "Friends," they all exclaimed. Then they heard footsteps approach the door, which slowly opened and revealed a very pretty Munchkin girl standing in the doorway. "Nimmie Amee!" cried the tin twins. "That's my name," replied the girl, looking at them in cold surprise. "But who can you be?" "Don't you know me, Nimmie?" said the Tin Woodman. "I'm your old sweetheart, Nick Chopper." "Don't you know me, my dear?" said the Tin Soldier. "I'm your old sweetheart, Captain Fighter." Nimmie Amee smiled at them both. Then she looked beyond them, at the rest of the party, and smiled again. However, she seemed more amused than pleased. "Come in," she said, leading the way inside. "Even sweethearts are forgotten after a time, but you and your friends are welcome." The room they now entered was cozy and comfortable, being neatly furnished and well swept and dusted. But they found someone there besides Nimmie Amee. A man dressed in the attractive Munchkin costume was lazily reclining in an easy chair, and he sat up and turned his eyes on the visitors with a cold and indifferent stare that was almost insolent. He did not even rise from his seat to greet the strangers, but after glaring at them he looked away with a scowl, as if they were of too little importance to interest him. The tin men returned this man's stare with interest, but they did not look away from him because neither of them seemed able to take his eyes off this Munchkin, who was remarkable in having one tin arm quite like their own tin arms. "Seems to me," said Captain Fighter in a voice that sounded harsh and indignant, "that you, sir, are a vile impostor." "Gently, gently," cautioned the Scarecrow. "Don't be rude to strangers, Captain." "Rude?" shouted the Tin Soldier, now very much provoked. "Why, he's a scoundrel, a thief." "The villain is wearing my own head." "Yes," added the Tin Woodman, "and he's wearing my right arm. I can recognize it by the two warts on the little finger. "Good gracious!" exclaimed Woot. "Then this must be the man whom old Kuklip patched together and named Chopfight." The man now turned toward them, still scowling. "Yes, that is my name," he said in a voice like a growl, "and it is absurd for you tin creatures, or for anyone else, to claim my head, or arm, or any part of me, for they are my personal property." "You? You're a nobody," shouted Captain Fighter. "You're just a mix-up," declared the Emperor. Now, gentlemen," interrupted Nimmie Amee, "I must ask you to be more respectful to poor Chopfight, for, being my guest, it is not polite for you to insult my husband." "Your husband?" the Tin Twins exclaimed in dismay. "Yes," said she. "I married Chopfight a long time ago because my other two sweethearts had deserted me." This reproof embarrassed both Nick Chopper and Captain Fighter. They looked down, shamefaced, for a moment, and then the Tin Woodman explained in an earnest voice. "I rusted." "So did I," said the Tin Soldier. "I could not know that, of course," asserted Nimmie Amee. "All I knew was that neither of you came to marry me, as you had promised to do. But men are not scarce in the land of Oz. After I came here to live, I met Mr. Chopfight, and he was the more interesting because he reminded me strongly of both of you, as you were before you became tin. He even had a tin arm, and that reminded me of you the more." "No wonder," remarked the Scarecrow. "But listen, Nimmie Amee," said the astonished Woot. "He really is, both of them, for he is made of their cast-off parts." "Oh, you're quite wrong," declared Polychrome, laughing, for she was greatly enjoying the confusion of the others. "The Tin Men are still themselves, and they will tell you, and so Chopfight must be someone else." They looked at her bewildered, for the facts in the case were too puzzling to be grasped at once. "It is all the fault of old Kuklip," muttered the Tin Woodman. "He had no right to use our cast of parts to make another man with." "It seems he did it, however," said Nimmie Amee calmly, "and I married him because he resembled you both. I won't say he is a husband to be proud of, because he has a mixed nature and isn't always an agreeable companion. There are times when I have to chide him gently, both with my tongue and my broomstick. But he is my husband, and I must make the best of him." "If you don't like him," suggested the Tin Woodman, "Captain Fighter and I can chop him up with our axe and sword, and each take such parts of the fellow as belong to him. Then we are willing for you to select one of us as your husband." "That is a good idea," approved Captain Fighter, drawing his sword. "No," said Nimmie Amee, "I think I'll keep the husband I have now. He is now trained to draw the water and carry in the wood and hoe the cabbages and weed the flower beds and dust the furniture and perform many tasks like a character. A new husband would have to be scolded and gently chided until he learns my ways. So I think it will be better to keep my Chopfight, and I see no reason why you should object to him. You two gentlemen threw him away when you became tin, because you had no further use for him, so you cannot justly claim him now. I advise you to go back to your own homes and forget me, as I have forgotten you." "Good advice," laughed Polychrome, dancing. "Are you happy?" asked the Tin Soldier. "Of course I am," said Nimmie Amee. "I'm the mistress of all I survey, the queen of my little domain." "Wouldn't you like to be the Empress of the Winkies?" asked the Tin Woodman. "Mercy, no," she answered. "That would be a lot of bother. I don't care for society or pomp or posing. All I ask is to be left alone and not to be annoyed by visitors." The Scarecrow nudged Woot the Wanderer. "That sounds to me like a hint," he said. "Looks as if we'd had our journey for nothing," remarked Woot, who was a little ashamed and disappointed because he had proposed the journey. "I am glad, however," said the Tin Woodman, "that I have found Nimmie Amee and discovered that she is already married and happy." It will relieve me of any further anxiety concerning her. For my part, said the tin soldier, I am not sorry to be free. The only thing that really annoys me is finding my head upon Chopfight's body. As for that, I'm pretty sure it is my body, or a part of it anyway, remarked the Emperor of the Winkies. But never mind, friend soldier. Let us be willing to donate our cast of members to ensure the happiness of Nimmie Amee, and be thankful it is not our fate to hoe cabbages and draw water and be chided in the place of this creature Chopfight. Yes, agreed the soldier, we have much to be thankful for, Polychrome, who had wandered outside, now poked her pretty head through an open window and exclaimed in a pleased voice, It's getting cloudy. Perhaps it is going to rain. Chapter 23. Through the Tunnel. It didn't rain just then, although the clouds in the sky grew thicker and more threatening. Polychrome hoped for a thunderstorm, followed by her rainbow, but the two tin men did not relish the idea of getting wet. They even preferred to remain in Nimmie Amee's house, although they felt they were not welcome there, rather than go out and face the coming storm. But the Scarecrow, who was a very thoughtful person, said to his friends, If we remain here until after the storm, and Polychrome goes away on her rainbow, then we will be prisoners inside the wall of solid air. So it seems best to start upon our journey, our return journey, at once. If I get wet, my straw stuffing will be ruined, and if you two tin gentlemen get wet, you may perhaps rust again and become useless. But even that is better than to stay here. Once we are free of the barrier, we have Woot the Wanderer to help us, and he can oil your joints and restuff my body, if it becomes necessary, for the boy is made of meat, which neither rusts nor gets soggy or mouldy. Come along then, cried Polychrome from the window, and the others, realizing the wisdom of the Scarecrow's speech, took leave of Nimmie Amee, who was glad to be rid of them, and said goodbye to her husband, who merely scowled and made no answer, and then they hurried from the house. Your old parts are not very polite, I must say, remarked the Scarecrow, when they were in the garden. No, said Woot, Chopfight is a regular grouch. He might have wished us a pleasant journey at the very least. I beg you not to hold us responsible for that creature's actions, pleaded the Tin Woodman. We are through with Chopfight and shall have nothing further to do with him. Polychrome danced ahead of the party and led them straight to the burrow of the Blue Rabbit, which they might have had some difficulty in finding without her. There she lost no time in making them all small again. The Blue Rabbit was busy nibbling cabbage leaves in Nimmie Amee's garden, so they did not ask his permission, but at once entered the burrow. Even now the raindrops were beginning to fall, but it was quite dry inside the tunnel, and by the time they had reached the other end, outside the circular wall of solid air, the storm was at its height, and the rain was coming down in torrents. Let us wait here, proposed Polychrome, peering out of the hole and then quickly retreating. The rainbow won't appear until after the storm, and I can make you big again in a jiffy before I join my sisters on our bow. That's a good plan, said the Scarecrow approvingly. It will save me from getting soaked and soggy. It will save me from rusting, said the Tin Soldier. It will enable me to remain highly polished, said the Tin Woodman. Oh, as for that, I prefer myself not to get my pretty clothes wet, laughed the Rainbow's daughter. But while we wait, I will bid you all adieu. I must also thank you for saving me from that dreadful giantess, Mrs. Yoop. You have been good and patient comrades, and I have enjoyed our adventures together, but I am never so happy as when on my dear Rainbow. Will your father scold you for getting left on the earth? Asked Woot. I suppose so, said Polychrome gaily. I'm always getting scolded for my mad pranks, as they are called. My sisters are so sweet and lovely and proper that they never dance off our rainbow, and so they never have any adventures. Adventures to me are good fun, only I never like to stay too long on Earth because I really don't belong here. I shall tell my father the Rainbow that I'll try not to be so careless again, and he will forgive me because in our sky mansions there is always joy and happiness. They were indeed sorry to part with their dainty and beautiful companion and assured her of their devotion if they ever chanced to meet again. She shook hands with the Scarecrow and the Tin Men, and kissed Woot the Wanderer lightly upon his forehead. And then the rain suddenly ceased, and as the tiny people left the burrow of the Blue Rabbit, a glorious big rainbow appeared in the sky, and the end of its arch slowly descended and touched the ground just where they stood. Woot was so busy watching a score of lovely maidens, sisters of Polychrome, who were leaning over the edge of the bow, and another score who danced gaily amid the radiance of the splendid hues, that he did not notice he was growing big again. But now Polychrome joined her sisters on the rainbow, and the huge arch lifted and slowly melted away as the sun burst from the clouds and sent its own white beams dancing over the meadows. "Why, she's gone!" exclaimed the boy, and turned to see his companions still waving their hands in token of adieu to the vanished Polychrome. Chapter 24. The Curtain Falls. Well, the rest of the story is quickly told, for the return journey of our adventurers was without any important incident. The Scarecrow was so afraid of meeting the Hippo-Giraffe and having his straw eaten again, that he urged his comrades to select another route to the Emerald City, and they willingly consented, so that the Invisible Country was wholly avoided. Of course, when they reached the Emerald City, their first duty was to visit Ozma's palace, where they were royally entertained. The Tin Soldier and Woot the Wanderer were welcomed as warmly as any strangers might be who had been travelling companions of Ozma's dear old friends, the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman. At the banquet table that evening, they related the manner in which they had discovered Nimmie Amee, and told how they had found her happily married to Chopfight, whose relationship to Nick Chopper and Captain Fighter was so bewildering that they asked Ozma's advice what to do about it. "You need not consider Chopfight at all," replied the beautiful girl ruler of Oz. "If Nimmie Amee is content with that misfit man for a husband, we have not even just cause to blame Kuklip for gluing him together." "I think it was a very good idea," added little Dorothy, "for if Kuklip hadn't used up your cast of parts, they would have been wasted. It's wicked to be wasteful, isn't it?" "Well, anyhow," said Woot the Wanderer, "Chopfight being kept a prisoner by his wife is too far away from anyone to bother either of you Tin Men in any way. If you hadn't gone where he is and discovered him, you would never have worried about him." "What do you care anyhow?" Betsy Bobbin asked the Tin Woodman, "so long as Nimmie Amee is satisfied." "And just to think," remarked Tiny Trot, "that any girl would rather live with a mixture like Chopfight on faraway Mount Munch than to be the Empress of the Winkies." "It is her own choice," said the Tin Woodman contentedly, "and after all, I'm not sure the Winkies would care to have an empress." It puzzled Ozma for a time to decide what to do with the Tin Soldier. If he went with the Tin Woodman to the Emperor's castle, she felt that the two men might not be able to live together in harmony, and moreover, the Emperor would not be so distinguished if he had a double constantly beside him. So she asked Captain Fighter if he was willing to serve her as a soldier, and he promptly declared that nothing would please him more. After he had been in her service for some time, Ozma sent him to the Gillikin country with instructions to keep order among the wild people who inhabit some parts of that unknown country of Oz. As for Woot, being a wanderer by profession, he was allowed to wander wherever he desired, and Ozma promised to keep watch over his future journeys and to protect the boy as well as she was able. in case he ever got into more trouble. All this having been happily arranged, the Tin Woodman returned to his tin castle, and his chosen comrade, the Scarecrow, accompanied him on the way. The two friends were sure to pass many pleasant hours together in talking over their recent adventures, for as they neither ate nor slept, they found their greatest amusement in conversation. The end. This has been The Tin Woodman of Oz by L. Frank Baum, narrated by Sam Kusi.